Last year, Tunisia's President Kais Saied took drastic steps that sparked crisis after crisis. He dissolved the government and sacked parliament. Mass protests have engulfed the country ever since. Now Saied's latest move is fueling renewed outrage. The dismissal of dozens of judges and the president declaring Islam will not be a state religion. Thousands of protesters hit the streets in the capital Tunis, condemning the moves. Saied received a new draft constitution last week that he'll have to approve before a referendum, which is expected to be held next month. The Tunisian president has faced growing criticism for consolidating nearly every executive branch under his control. Protesters have been demanding more political and economic reforms as the country grips with skyrocketing inflation and high unemployment. More than a decade ago, Tunisia was the first to see mass uprisings that eventually spread across the region, toppling long-time governments in Libya, Egypt and Yemen. So is Saied proving his critics right? Is he taking Tunisia back to the era of one-man rule? And to discuss how these latest decisions will impact Tunisia, joining me now from Tunis is Salih Yassoun. He is a political analyst who writes extensively on Tunisian politics. And from Brussels, Yasmin Akrimi. She is a North Africa analyst at the Brussels International Center. A warm welcome to you both, and thanks for joining me on Straight Talk. Salih, let me begin with you. How have things evolved since last July, when President Saied sacked the government and seized far-reaching powers to rule by decree?
Well, what it started out to be a temporary process with a temporary suspension of the parliament ended up Kais Saied gradually expanding his power over state institutions at the expense of the parliament first. And then with the recent months, what we have been observing is that Kais Saied is also has been expanding his power, authority over the judiciary with the dismissal of judges or the Judicial Supreme Court. And so what we are seeing right now is basically consolidation of power under the Saied's hand.
So, Yasmin, how is President Saied's constitutional reform process going? Is a referendum likely to take place on time, which is slated for July 25th? And how tense is the political situation in the country right now?
Well, the referendum will happen unless there's a huge political or any other event happening. The 25th of July will be the day of the referendum. Now, in 2 days, on Thursday, on the 13th of June, we will have the official project of the Constitution, which no one knows apart from the president at the moment and three jurists that drafted this constitution, but they do not know about the changes that the president added to the final draft. Now, the political and socioeconomic situation is very tense. It is not ideal at all for any type of electoral event, let alone a referendum. There's a huge confusion, really, about what's happening and the stakes, and there's significant opposition to not the Constitution itself or the referendum itself, because we do not know what the project is, but the whole process that has been very exclusionary to all counterpowers in Tunisia.
Yes. So, Salih, under these circumstances, is it realistic to hold a credible and fair referendum on a new constitution? And what does it offer that is different than the hard-won 2014 referendum?
Well, let me start with the second question. What does it offer? It will probably offer, we don't know about the details of the constitution, except for some clauses related to economic development. What it will offer is that probably it will offer a structure with substantively weakened political parties, and it will offer a system that's more in line with a strengthened role for the president. And in line with that constitution, I expect the drafting of a new electoral law as well that will rearrange how MPs get elected to the parliament. Whether you're related to your first question, from Kais Saied's perspective, this is the perfect time, actually, because the parties are divided, weakened, and most of them are calling for boycott. And the only opposing forces seem to be the unions, basically,
Yes.
organized groups, the UJTT or Judges Union, which don't have political parties, basically, to oppose this on a political platform. So from Kais Saied's perspective, this is the right time.
So, Yasmin, how has Saied's unorthodox moves helped traditionally opposed factions in Tunisian politics to unite against them?
There's very little union, really. Even opposing parties cannot agree on whether they should boycott the process or vote no. So there's really very little union, which is surprising, really, because all political parties, even like you said, the UJTT is opposing this process. There should be a bit more union in opposing the project. Now, the problem is people or political parties do not agree with what Kais Saied has been doing since the 25th of July, but they do not want to go back to what we call the 24th of July process, where the political party Ennahda and its allies really controlled the country and really installed the democracy of Fasad. So there's this dilemma for political parties and any opposing power to be very cautious when they oppose Kais Saied, because there is no really viable alternative to his rule at the moment.
So, on the other hand, Salih, why does the Tunisian president want to remove Islam from the constitution, and what does it mean for the country moving forward?
So, why does he want to remove Islam from constitution? In his previous speeches, Kais Saied actually says, the religion cannot have a state. Religion is not a person. State cannot have a religion because state is not a person, is not an individual. It cannot pray, it cannot fast. So I would say it's more rhetorical at this stage because, in Tunisia, law is secular except for the family code, which derives its source from some Islamic schools, but its language is still secular.
Yes.
And Kais Saied is opposed to equality in inheritance to begin with. And I think the purpose is more to signal that Islamists are no longer in control. And I think Sadiq Belay, in the Constitution Draft Committee, also mentioned that leaving out Islam from the Constitution signals that Ennahda is no longer part of Tunisian governance structure.
Yes.
Between 2011 and 2014, Ennahda during the constitution writing process, Ennahda debated this issue seriously with secular counterparts.
So, Yasmin, some argue that Saied proposed removing Islam as a state religion as a way to shield himself from Western criticism and calls for political reforms. Would you agree that was part of his thinking?
I do not necessarily agree with this, because I think his proposal is to remove Islam as the religion of the state or of the people. So the current formulation, which was taken from the 1959 Constitution, it was taken as the same. You can interpret it as either Islam is the religion of the state or of the people. Kais Saied talked about realizing the objectives or the meanings of al-Sharia, so Islamic law. So I think his understanding of Islam as part of political life and social life is much bigger than what we have in the Constitution of 2014. And I should really remind that Kais Saied is far from being a secular. He is a conservative who believes that religion should play a significant role in Tunisians' lives. And he thinks it's not even up to discussion that Tunisians are Muslims, so it shouldn't even be mentioned.
Yes.
Islam is part of the state anyway.
So, Salih, Tunisia is facing its worst financial crisis and seeking a $4 billion loan from the IMF. What's the latest in that, and what's behind this economic instability?
Well, the past years have been tough on Tunisian economy, which particularly relies on tourism. First came after the revolution, first came the disruptions due to terrorist attacks, and then COVID hit Tunisian economy particularly hard as well.
Yes.
And added to that, large public sector in Tunisia is putting a heavy burden on public finances, which requires substantive restructuring based on the IMF's perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Added to that, the disruption of supply chain management in the past years, has added even more stress. What's at stake right now is IMF asked the Tunisian government to settle on a program with the UGTT first,
yes,
before reaching out to IMF for an agreement. And I think we are at the stage of observing the finalization of this process.
Yes. So, but Yasmin, we know that the powerful UGTT Union Confederation is against a possible deal with the IMF. So how do you think the president would balance conditions from international lenders and the needs of Tunisian people?
So the UGTT is not exactly against any type of agreement with the IMF. They are for an open discussion, a frank discussion with past governments and the current government about how to really alleviate the IMF's consequences, or like the IMF's program's consequences on Tunisian people, especially the middle class. Now that's the current government is refusing to have a frank discussion with the UGTT, especially about state companies, state-owned companies that the UGTT is very much against selling, but that the IMF and the current government are moving towards that. Mm-hmm. So it is really a matter of how to apply the IMF's program, because both the UGTT and the government know that is inevitable. It's how to, discuss and negotiate a deal with the IMF.
So, Tali, one quick question. Are there any lessons learned from the Arab Spring, or it was just a delusion?
Our big lesson is that what appear to be democratic openings do not necessarily immediately lead to economic openings, more economic opportunities, especially for the working class, for unemployed people. We need to, as scholars, practitioners, newsmakers, we need to think a lot harder about, how democratic openings can contribute to economic openings.
All right, Yasmin and Saleh, unfortunately, we'll have to leave it here. Thank you very much for joining me on Straight Talk.